So in this video, we're going to work on simple edge detection for scrolling. So when my mouse gets to the edge of the viewport, we want the camera to follow. So the way we're going to do that is actually pretty straightforward. But the first thing we need to do is set up our mouse cursor so we can actually see it. Because if I go to play now, you'll notice that, and I focus on the screen, we don't have a mouse cursor that's showing. And so we want to enable that by default. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in first. Let's just make sure that we have our player controller set up. So if you go into your project settings, edit project settings, and then you click on maps and modes, we just want to make sure that the player controller class is set up, so and it's set on the one that we did create. So just make sure that that's set properly. And now we're going to jump into that blueprint player controller class, and we're going to enable the mouse cursor. So we want this to begin on the begin play event. So let's just zoom in a little bit. And then what we want to do is add a node to set the input mode, game, and UI. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect that up. So that's going to fire. And for the player controller, we want to this to be self, get a reference to self, because we are in the player controller. We're going to set that there. And then on the output here, we are going to we want to show our mouse cursor. So if you type show mouse, you'll see this variable set mouse cursor, and we want to tick this box. And so what this is going to do is actually enable the mouse cursor on our screen. So we save, hit compile, jump back to our map, press play, and now when you focus on the screen, you'll see that we do have a mouse cursor that's set up, but it's currently not locked to the viewport. So let's do that. Let's jump back into our player controller, and you'll see in mouse lock mode. So we want to say lock always, and this will make sure to lock the mouse cursor to our viewport. So now if we compile this, jump back to our map, hit play, and when I focus on the viewport, you'll notice that my mouse cursor can't leave the bounds of the viewport, and that's what we wanted to do. Great, so that's the first step. So let's just make a comment. Set up cursor input. Great. And now what we'll do is our actual edge scrolling we'll do in our blueprint player. So let's jump in there. So the first thing we're going to do is, the goal is to add the actor, to actually move the actor in the world. So if I go add actor world offset, we will see this is the target node that we want to fill with values. So I'm going to just split this, and we're going to be filling in this X and Y value. That's where we're going to be moving the camera. So the first thing we're going to do is get the player controller. Let's get player controller. Great. And now we're going to actually get our mouse position. Mouse position. Perfect. So we have those two things. Now what we want to do is, with our mouse position, we want to figure out when it's at the edge of the screen. And so to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to use another variable. We're going to get our viewport size. And if I just right click on that and split the pin, then I can pull out the X and Y values. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our mouse position and divide it by our viewport size. And so what this is going to do is give us a ratio between 1 and 0 that represents where our mouse is on the screen. So let's say if our viewport was 1600 wide, then when we took our mouse position, and if it was say 1580, and we divided it by 1600, it would be very close to 1. It would be 0.9, 0.98 or 0.9 something. So what we're going to do is we're going to use those thresholds because we don't want it exactly at the edge. We want some window where we actually do the detection. So what we're going to say is, actually first let's just make sure this is working. So we're going to get our mouse. We need to have this all execute on an event. So we're going to do mouse X. So mouse event. If you see that there, great. And I want to take, just so we know that what's happening, I'm going to take this X position and I want to print a string. Oh, whoops. We want to print the duration. We want the string. That float gets converted to a string. And so what we'll do is on this X, we'll have this execute. So if I save this now and I compile it, jump back to our map, we should see the X position being printed out to the screen wherever our mouse is. I'm gonna hit play, and now we see that. So as I move to the right, we see the X increasing all the way up, and then vice versa, moving to the left, we see it dropping. Perfect. So that's working. So we'll just delete these nodes. And now let's have our threshold. So let's say this is greater than, and we'll write in 0.98. Then we're going to actually set up a branch here. Branch. We're going to take this value out, have this execute there, and then we're going to have this branch trigger our add actor world offset. But now we need some value to actually update. So we want to have essentially a scroll speed. So what we can do is in our variables for this, we have our zoom direction from before, our zoom values. Let's make a scroll speed variable. And we're going to make this a float. Scroll speed. We're going to make this a float, and if you jump back over to your details panel, and once we compile, we can set a default scroll speed value. So I'm going to set this to 600. So now if I just drag this out, get scroll speed, this is what we're going to use for the basis of our movement. So what we're going to do is we don't want it to move 600 units on every tick. What we want to do is we want to tie it to something, and then we're going to tie it to this other value called get world delta seconds. We're going to multiply these two together, and this is the value that we're going to plug in to our Y location. So if you look here, what this is this represents the world time between ticks, so between frames. And this is a nice static value. It's not, this one is based on the world speed, so if the world time was changed independently of the frame rate, we would have a constant value for our movement, and that's what we're looking for here. But you can change that, and you can play around with it, likewise with the scroll speed variable, which represents how fast we are scrolling. So if I compile that, go back to our map, and now hit play, if I move all the way to this edge, you see we're moving. We don't have the other direction working, but we do have this direction working to the right. So that's perfect. So what we're going to do is we need to have the other direction. So I'm going to duplicate this node, and we're going to use this, but we're just going to flip the value of our scroll speed. So I'm going to drag a pin here. We're going to multiply, but this time we're just going to say -1 to invert it. And then we're going to plug this into our Y location. Now, when I press compile, I press play, you can see when I scroll to the right, moves to the right, scroll to the left, it doesn't move. Now, why is that? Well, nothing's triggering right now, but we didn't actually set up the threshold yet. So let's do that. So if we jump back here, and we say less than And let's set our threshold window maybe to 0.02. We'll set up, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit so it's more readable. Drag this out here. We have our branch. Let's add another branch. So in the event that this is false, we're going to trigger this. We'll make this check. And when this is true, we will trigger our offset movement in the left direction. So we'll compile, hit play again, and you can now see when I move to the left, our camera is scrolling, which is pretty cool. So now we have camera scrolling. You could adjust the speed. So now we just need to do the up and down, which is very easy. We're almost there. What we're going to do is we're going to take all of these nodes. I'm just going to move them up. I'm just going to copy and paste them for our Y direction, and we're going to adjust the pins. So instead of the X, we're actually going to be looking at the Y. So I'm doing that there. And instead of our mouse event for our X, I want to delete that. I'm going to go mouse Y, mouse event Y, plug that into our branch. Instead of our Y, our delta Y, we're going to plug this into our delta X on both of these nodes. So let's highlight all of these, hit C, and we'll label this edge scrolling for our comment. And now when I compile, jump back to our map, hit play, you can see when I move up, oh, seems we have it inverted. So let's fix that. If we jump back in, what we want here is we just need to invert these two pins. So we'll break this pin, drag this guy up to here to our X, and then we will drag this guy down to our X, and we can actually just clean this up, make it look a little nicer, and there we have it. So now if I compile, jump back to our map, and hit play, you'll see when I scroll up, moving up, scroll down, or moving down, and left and right. And you can see if we were to jump back and adjust the scroll speed default value, maybe say like 1,000, we will be scrolling a lot faster. And now when I hit play and move, yeah, we are going a lot faster. So you can play with this, but in our next video, we'll look at doing some more with the actual camera.